In Dubai's desert, a mega airport worth $30 billion was meant to shatter world records and secure the city's future beyond oil. Now, the lights are off, the runways are empty, and an aviation empire sits unfinished. How does the world's boldest dream unravel overnight? What did the world miss? And who pays the price for this collapse? This is where the real story begins. Dubai International Airport was not just busy, it was bursting. Every terminal, every gate, every inch of floor space was pushed to its limit. At peak hours, the departure halls overflowed with travelers, lines snaked through security, and the air was thick with the sound of rolling suitcases and boarding calls. The airport, built for a different era, struggled to keep up with the city's ambition. By 2009, DXB was already handling 32 million passengers a year. Within a decade, that number would triple, making it the world's busiest airport for international travelers. Airlines fought for landing slots that did not exist. Arriving flights circled above the city, waiting for a free gate. Missed connections became routine. Cargo shipments backed up on the tarmac, costing businesses millions by the hour. Every delay meant lost revenue, not just for the airlines, but for Dubai itself. The airport was the city's beating heart, pumping money and people into the economy. But the arteries were clogged. Expansion projects tried to patch the problem with new concourses, extra runways, and round-the-clock operations. Still, it was not enough. Forecasts warned that at this pace, DXB would hit a hard ceiling. Airlines were already warning that growth could stall, and Dubai's status as a global crossroads was at risk. Something drastic had to happen. The city faced a choice. It had to either squeeze even more out of an exhausted hub, or imagine something so big that it could never be outgrown. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum did not just want an airport. He wanted a new city, one built around flight, where runways would shape the skyline and commerce would never sleep. The directive was clear: ignore the limits of the old world. In the desert south of Dubai, planners drew up a master plan for the impossible. They called it an Aerotropolis, a city engineered for the age of aviation, where every building, every road, every business would orbit a single colossal hub. The vision stretched across 36,000 acres, 5 times larger than Dubai International. 5 parallel runways, each long enough for the world's biggest jets, would operate side by side. 400 gates, ready to handle 250 million travelers every year. At full stretch, 260 million passengers could pass through its halls, more than the populations of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. Capacity was everything. But this was not just about people. The plan carved out entire districts for logistics, cargo, and business, warehouses the size of stadiums, free zones for global companies, residential towers for 1 million workers and families. The airport would anchor a city-state, with its own economy pulsing day and night. Everything depended on scale: bigger planes, bigger crowds, bigger bets. The price tag was $30 billion, a sum that could have built a dozen ordinary airports. Yet in Dubai, ordinary was never an option. The world watched as the city promised to leap from crowded terminals to a future where it would control the crossroads of the sky. Every decision, every dollar, every square meter of sand was staked on one idea: that Dubai could outgrow its rivals and, in doing so, outlast them. In late 2008, the world's financial markets buckled. Dubai, once flush with easy credit and investor confidence, suddenly faced a harsh new reality. The city's boldest project, the airport city rising from the desert, felt the shock first. Contractors who had worked around the clock began packing up their tools. Payment schedules slipped. Banks that had once lined up to fund the dream now demanded guarantees or pulled out entirely. The original timeline, so confidently announced, became a moving target. In early 2009, officials quietly postponed the first phase of Al Maktoum International, shifting opening dates from 2008 to 2010. Behind the scenes, financiers pored over spreadsheets, recalculating risk. Some investors walked away, unwilling to wait out a global recession. Others renegotiated, hoping for a rebound that never quite arrived. On the ground, progress slowed to a crawl. The grand vision of 5 runways and a city built on air traffic was suddenly out of step with a world in retreat. Cargo operations launched in 2010, but the passenger terminals, once expected to open in quick succession, remained empty shells. Construction crews, once numbering in the thousands, dwindled as contracts were scaled back or suspended. The desert began to reclaim the edges of the site, sand drifting across unfinished taxiways. Each delay carried a cost: idle equipment, mounting interest, lost momentum. For the first time, doubt crept in. If Dubai could not rely on endless growth, what would happen to a project built on the promise of perpetual demand? The warning signs were there, but few wanted to read them. The world had changed, and the airport's future was suddenly uncertain. Air traffic did not just slow down, it disappeared. In early 2020, the world's busiest skies emptied almost overnight. Dubai's runways, once crowded with arrivals from every continent, stood silent. Global passenger numbers plunged by more than 90% within weeks. Airlines grounded entire fleets. Emirates, the pride of Dubai, parked its A380 aircraft in rows along the tarmac. Etihad and Qatar Airways followed, mothballing wide-body aircraft that had once made the Gulf the crossroads of the world. Schedules that had promised hundreds of daily departures now showed nothing but blank spaces. Inside the unfinished terminals of Al Maktoum International, construction lights flickered off. Work crews vanished. Every forecast, every spreadsheet, became worthless. Planners had once imagined 200 million travelers a year. Now there were days when not a single commercial flight landed. International aviation, which had seemed untouchable, was suddenly in free fall. IATA reported that global air traffic collapsed to levels not seen since the 1970s. Billions of dollars in jet orders were deferred or canceled. Aircraft lessors scrambled to find buyers for planes no one wanted. Maintenance hangars filled with jets going nowhere. The dream of a mega hub built for endless growth shattered against a reality no one could have predicted. Dubai's gamble relied on a world that kept moving. But the world had stopped. Every empty seat, every silent departure board, every grounded aircraft was a reminder. The era of unstoppable demand was over. What began as a slowdown became a freeze. The city that had built its future on the promise of perpetual motion now faced a question it had never prepared for. What happens when the passengers never come back? Behind closed doors, the language turned careful. Official statements spoke of a phased approach and adjusted timelines, but the reality was far starker. The immediate build-out for passenger terminals was suspended. Construction contracts were quietly deferred. Internal memos described the pause as a strategic reassessment, a way to keep options open without committing to a future no one could guarantee. The leadership faced a dilemma: continue pouring billions into empty halls, or admit that the world had changed. Pressure mounted from all sides. Airlines refused to split operations between 2 distant hubs, while financial planners warned of sunk costs ballooning with every month of inaction. The grand vision, once described as Dubai's post-oil lifeline, was now officially on hold. No ceremony, no final announcement, just a silent halt, wrapped in the language of long-term planning as the desert crept closer to the gates. On the edge of Dubai's sprawl, the airport's empty runways stretch into silence. Hundreds of thousands of square meters of apron sit untouched, with only the wind moving sand across faded markings. A handful of cargo flights still land each week, barely enough to break the stillness. In one corner, the skeleton of Emirates' new engineering hangar rises, a $950 million project promising readiness for a future that remains uncertain. Most of the infrastructure stands idle, lights off, waiting for a purpose that never came. The desert presses in, reclaiming ground from the concrete. Paul Griffiths, the airport's chief, once called this a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Now, even his optimism echoes in the emptiness, a reminder of a dream built for crowds that never arrived. Even as new plans promise revival, Dubai's silent runways warn of ambition outpacing reality. In a world shifting away from limitless growth, every unfinished megaproject is a mirror. What we choose to build or abandon still shapes the future. What do you think? Pause or press on.